All right, I think we are right at 11, so we'll go ahead and get going. We may have a few more trickle in, but we have more than enough things to talk about, so we'll go ahead and get going. My name's Keaton Pearce. If I've not had the chance to meet you yet, I'm the pulpit minister at the Church of Christ at Gold Hill Road, which is right outside of Charlotte. I got a chance to know Alan through his sister Jan. They worshiped the congregation that I was at before Gold Hill Road, and we started talking about this concept of digital discipleship back in 19, even before Connect was really a fully fledged idea. Alan and I began to talk about this, and a little bit of my backstory before we kind of get into this. So I came into ministry in a roundabout way. I'm from Kentucky, went to the University of Kentucky, and got a digital communications degree with a minor in graphic design, and didn't even know if ministry was necessarily for me. Met my wife at a Bible camp that we now are heavily involved with in South Carolina. She was a Clemson grad, and so we moved to South Carolina, and that's kind of set the course for where we've been geographically, and ended up doing my master's. But while I was at Kentucky, I had the opportunity to intern at a news station, WKYT, which is probably the biggest news station in central Kentucky. We produced a sports show, nothing to do with the Bible, but it would set kind of a foundation that would end up coming back and pay huge dividends down the road. Had no idea what 2020 would become, but this kind of helped set some of the stage for some of this digital discipleship. So this is a unique class, admittedly. You're hearing great classes, Phil and Hiram and Dale and Jeff, and they're doing a fantastic job. This is my only slide with a Bible verse. So please don't heckle me out of the room for that. But this is a unique topic because we're going to kind of approach this from three prongs. We're going to look at this as, what is digital discipleship? Is it a viable strategy? When we're thinking about how to be evangelistic, how to be disciple-minded, is this worth our time pursuing? And then probably the biggest of it is, what can I do about it? I think I can prove to you relatively quickly that, yeah, it's viable, yeah, it's effective, but then the crux of it is, what can I do? What can you do? What can we as congregations do? And that's where we're going to spend the majority of our time. But I think the impetus of this, and at Gold Hill Road, this is one of our themes. This is our theme congregation-wide for the year. It's called Therefore Go, and it's a derivative of Matthew 28:19 and 20. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you. This idea of making disciples, of sending people out, is what digital discipleship is, using different vehicles that weren't available 2,000 years ago. I read it this way. This class is going to be it's going to be a combination of tools, it's going to be a combination of research, and a combination of trying to practically mold all that together for you. There's pretty much three of the kind of big, in terms of research groups that do research across Christianity. Pew is one of them. If you're not familiar with Pew, I would highly recommend you get in touch with them. They are not specific to the Church of Christ. They kind of do this at a much broader level. That's important to you because they don't have a sample size of 200 when they do research like this. They have a sample size of 10,000. So when Pew puts something out, it's worth listening to. Barna is another one that does great research, and that's going to comprise 95% of what we're going to look at, because they look at, how is the church growing? How is it stagnating? What are the evangelistic models that need to be effective in the next 10 years, 15 years, 50 years to make the church grow? And again, it's not unique to the churches of Christ, but they do some great work. So they said it this way: Christians have always been called to go and meet people where they are to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Today, we as Christians have a unique opportunity to do that with a reach and effectiveness that is generational in scope. And if you could read the rest of that article, the context of that is that we have an opportunity to use digital means to share the gospel that has been around for 2,000 years or more. We have an opportunity, and they've described it as generational in scope, because we can teach one lesson. Phil and I were just standing here talking. We have an opportunity to record one lesson and share that out to millions of folks that can come to know Christ. And I think, as you're going to find in this lesson, that is happening more and more. In fact, I think upwards of 80 to 90% of people are using technology, websites, podcasts, YouTube channels, things like this, to find congregations of where they're going to worship. It is getting more and more prevalent that people are coming to know Christ purely through digital means. Right? We're able to teach lessons and really present the gospel exactly as you or I would in a physical sense. We're able to do it in a digital sense. And then the key is, how do we then connect that person into local ministry? And that's probably outside the scope of this class, but that is going to be our thought. The Barna Group said it this way: since 2015 and every 3 years beyond. This is fascinating. The way they thought about this is starting in 15 and every 3-year chunk beyond this, the number of people that come to know Christ with an aid of some form of technology. The caveat of that is that could be anything as simple as I use a digital Bible, all the way up to I have completely come to know Christ through a playlist on YouTube or something to that effect. But since 15 and every 3 years following, the number of people that have come to know Christ with the aid of some form of technology grows by upwards of 10%. And notice this, it compounds on itself every cycle. So what that means is within the first 3-year cycle, they found approximately 10%. In the next 3-year cycle, they took that 10% growth, and they're saying that 10% is being added to that cumulatively. So in the next 15 years, by their estimation, almost 100% of people will come to know Christ with the aid of technology in some way. We're not saying that we're going to remove the human component, but that technology is going to play a significant role in the way we're able to share the gospel. I'm going to suggest to you that that this is an opportunity, this is a trend that we can either get on board with, or it can pass us by. They are tools that will exist whether we utilize them or not. I think Christ, the disciples, the apostles have always been in the business of going to where people are and utilizing the means that they have to do that. My aim, and I hope that your aim, is to find ways to utilize technology to help us in that regard. Abilene Christian, which is maybe the only slide by them, but they have a research branch of their university, and they found this. 37% of congregations reported feeling underserved and underprepared when it came to digital ministry. That is significant. We're getting awful close to, well over a quarter of all congregations are saying, we don't have the tools, we are not prepared to how to effectively minister in a digital format. 67% of people said that they would engage more with digital ministry if they were given the proper tools. And so I certainly commend you for being in that group of saying, hey, we want the tools. And that's what hopefully education like this is able to do of, what options do you have? And that's going to be kind of the way we're going to break this down is I think we have an individual opportunity. So we're going to look at about 4 or 5 ways that you as an individual, separate and apart from your congregation, are able to actively be involved if you want to be. And then we're going to look kind of at the tail end of congregationally, which has more reach, but also takes more effort. It takes more resource. But also, what can our congregations do together? So here's the 3 aims. That was kind of all the preamble to get us really into the meat and the potatoes, which is this. What is digital ministry? Is it a viable strategy? And if so, how can my congregation get involved? I've defined digital discipleship as this, and this is not a far cry from traditional discipleship that we've been talking about all week, but it's a way to build relationship, meet the needs of the community, and advance the gospel message in a digital space around a digital need or by utilizing a digital tool. So if you look at the front half of that, you'll recognize that is almost entirely what traditional discipleship is, the way we look at it through Scripture. And I'm going to suggest to you, discipleship is different from evangelism, but in a sense, discipleship is becoming more like Christ, to be a disciple, to be a apprentice of Christ. And evangelism is just the action tool of that. So we're going to kind of use these interchangeably, although there is a difference. But in terms of our digital format, there's a lot of overlap. So we look at what digital discipleship is. As of 17, the average person spends around 2 hours a day on social media, which adds up to a little over 5 years of time over a lifetime. But notice this, when social media was ranked among other daily activities, it was on average, a person will spend almost 3 times as much socializing. And if you looked in the context of this paper, they're talking about more than just browsing Facebook. This is YouTube, this is looking on Google, this is any kind of digital space, but a person is going to spend 3 times as much on social media, on digital media, as opposed to socializing in person. So as much as we as the church would say, hey, we value being together in person, fantastic, and you're certainly not going to get an argument from me, the people that we are trying to meet, statistics are telling us that they're spending over 3 times as much time, effort, energy, priority in a digital sense than they are in person. The average adult spends most of their waking time behind a screen these days between work, entertainment, education, and socializing. So we as the church have to figure out a way to, okay, if the average person is spending more time in front of a screen than they are face-to-face with people, we have to figure out how to get on that screen. or we're just going to fall behind is really the way it is. And we're kind of already there, but we're really trying to catch up some ground here. Hootsuite, which is just a software that helps manage social media. This is of 2018. I couldn't find anything more recent, but this was just to give you a sense of, we've got about, and all of these statistics, as best as I could find them, this was all put together for me, but they've all gone up, right? Our population has gone up. The amount of people that have access to the internet has gone up. Active social media users have. But you can already see, just as of 18, over half of the world's population have access to the internet. And this is over half now have active social media accounts. Almost 70% are unique mobile users, and we'll look at kind of mobile as its own animal here in a minute. And then active social media users on a mobile device is at 40%, and that's up now. So of the world's population, if we're going to really epitomize and look at Matthew 28 and talk about the Great Commission, this is the battleground. I'm going to suggest to you, and this is not to diminish foreign mission, local mission. I'm going to suggest to you that the digital world that we live in is probably our greatest mission field today. I mean, certainly in terms of dollars spent, effort put in, you're going to be hard-pressed, for an hour spent in digital ministry, you're going to be hard-pressed to get anything more valuable anywhere else, because it has a reach that face-to-face ministry just can't compete with, and it also has the ability to go out broader than any of us can pre-technology, right? So digital ministry and media has a way to really penetrate places that we might not be able to go otherwise. So is it viable? Is digital discipleship a viable strategy? And this is going to be a very long-winded way to get you kind of bought in. Because I recognize that, of the 15, 20 of us that are here today, and however many that will be watching it after the fact, represent a wide variety of congregations. There's probably some here that are 50 people. There are some here that I know that are over 1,000. And your digital needs, your resources are going to be different. So I'm certainly going to give you some practical stuff, but this may not cover all of it. So if there's something on here that you're like, hey, I love this idea of doing short-form video content, or doing a podcast, or doing, improving my website or whatever, and we don't have time to talk about it, come find me. I'm a full-time pulpit minister, but this is something I love to do, and I've had the ability to help congregations do this in a kind of consulting capacity in the past. So not everything, this is not all-inclusive is what I say all that to say. 87% said that digital presence and media availability was a primary motivator. All this is from Pew. A primary motivator in whether or not they would visit a church. So of all the ministry stuff that we do, right, you think about all of the money, all of the time, all of the emphasis that we place, that our deacons place, that our elders place on going and doing door knocking and having youth programs and all the things that we would say are essential and trying to get people in, and certainly those that are unchurched. Almost 90%, almost 9 out of every 10 people are saying that digital presence, and particularly media available, we're going to talk about it in a minute. What they mean by that is, can I watch sermons online? Can I watch classes online? Can I get a sense of what your church is like before I ever step in the front door? That availability is one of the primary motivators in whether or not you're able to get somebody in the door. Right? Because as prevalent as digital media is becoming, it's not going to ever replace the ability to converse with somebody one-on-one and have a Bible study and teach and preach. I mean, that is essentially what I do for a living, is that face-to-face interaction. But we have to get them in the door somehow. And that's always been the million-dollar question, is if we knew how we could get people just in the door better, the gospel is able to change lives. I mean, we've talked about that all week in a variety of ways. 87% are saying digital presence is a primary motivator in that. So if you attend a congregation, and there may be some of you that are saying, I'm not necessarily interested personally, I don't have the ability to influence my congregation, I'm going to suggest that you take back information like this to your eldership and say, hey, if we're not putting emphasis, if we don't have manpower, if we don't have resources dedicated to digital ministry, we are falling behind. We are less effective than those around us. And this is not just localized to Gen Z and millennials and younger folks, right? I think we kind of get the rap of thinking, oh, they're the only ones that care about technology. But Pew and Barna both found that people well into their 60s, this became a primary motivator because if I'm sick, can I watch services online? Can I stream online? What's the ability, can I navigate the website easily? All these things matter. 74% of people under the age of 35. So this is kind of that younger demographic that we so often talk about, but said that they greatly prefer to learn about a given topic via a digital medium. So they're talking about podcasting, they're talking about YouTube video, and that can be short form content like Reels, or that can be full up to, hour and a half long YouTube videos, digital courses, things like this. So again, almost 3/4 of people are saying, I prefer to learn via a digital medium. And that's not to say that print media is going to go away anytime soon, but that is to say that if we're actively wanting to find and reach the younger generation in particular, which again, that's not to say that it's any more valuable than the older, but that is the future of the church. They're saying we want to learn via a digital medium, and we as the church have to figure out how to facilitate that. 23% of new Christians, completely unchurched. So these are not people that grew up in church homes like maybe you and I did. These are not people that were being baptized at 13 because they've grown up in the church. These are completely coming at this from an unchurched perspective. Reported that their first interactions with Christianity was from an online source. So we're almost at a quarter, and that research was from 2019, so that very well could be over a quarter by this point, of new Christians are coming to know Christ, at least in part, because of digital media. So what are the questions that we're going to ask to kind of shape our strategy? Because I'll be the first to tell you, and anybody that's deep into technology will tell you, there are 13,000 ways to skin this cat, right? There is not a one best way. In fact, I'm going to suggest to you that the way I do it, the way I have seen it done and successfully done, may bomb where you are, and vice versa. You can tell me, Keaton, we have had so much success doing A, B, C, or D. We could try it at Gold Hill Road, and it's not going to work for a variety of reasons, and that's perfectly okay. So anybody that's going to suggest to you that there's only one way to do this, I'd be leery of, because there's a lot of ways. And that's good news, because that means that we have opportunities. There's things that you are actively want to be engaged in that maybe I don't. Maybe you have skill sets that I don't. You're able to step in. This is very much, I would say, kind of a digital branch, if you'll allow me to go this far, a digital branch of, when Paul describes the church as a body, right? There's different hands, there's feet, there's ears, and they all have different roles. Digital media is not divorced from that, right? There are different things for different folks. So questions to kind of shape the strategy that we're going to try to find is, what do I want them to know? So when we're thinking about what are we going to utilize from a church perspective or from an individual perspective, what do I want to share to somebody, right? I mean, it's critical in knowing your audience. This is true in the business world. This is probably even all the more true in spiritual world. If we, try to go too broadly, we end up not really talking to anybody. So what do I want them to know? What do I want them to do, right? What is going to be the end result of all of this study? The knowledge is going to lead to an action. What is that action going to be? And then perhaps most importantly, what can we do to create that next step, right? So I mean, in essence, you think about not purely from a digital perspective, but you think about, baptism, right? There's an information component, there is an action component, and then there is what can we do to facilitate that? Right, you think about the Ethiopian eunuch. There was an information component. There was a call to action, and then there was a what can we do to help make that possible? Let's go find that water to make it doable. Digital media, and strategies are not dissimilar from that. What do we want them to know? What do we want them to do? And what are going to be the next steps? And then once we've kind of identified those three things, this workflow that I work through to kind of help figure out is this viable for me? Is this viable for my congregation? When I consult with churches, this is what I ask them to look through. What is the problem? Is it real, and is it worth solving? Right? And that may seem obvious, but there's a lot of problems that are real. Are they worth the resource to solve? Maybe, maybe not. What is going to be the solution? Is your solution going to solve the problem? Because really, digital media, we're going to talk a little bit about YouTube and YouTube Shorts and things like that. It's the second biggest search engine in the world behind Google. Almost 80% of YouTube's traffic is question-oriented. Somebody will say, how do I change the oil in a 2005 Honda Civic, right? And they'll find 30,000 videos on how to do that. People are doing that from a scriptural perspective as well of, what is the context of, Romans chapter 6? What does that mean, right? Or why does God do this? What is this? And so we look at solutions that we can potentially offer to specific questions, and that helps us in digital media. Expectation versus solution. What kind of solution are the people expecting versus how might our solution be better? And so we're going to look at this as kind of the world is going to offer this wisdom. Here's scriptural wisdom that we can have that is infinitely better in a variety of reasons. right? What is the model that we're going to utilize? Is it viable? And particularly something that I always encourage churches to think about, is it scalable? What I mean by that is, can it get bigger as you receive results? If it can't, that's going to be a difficult ministry to maintain, because at a certain point, we are wanting things to grow, and if you have to completely rework your building to make some model that you're using work, it probably is not as valuable. Not to say that it's not worth doing, but for me, the very best digital ministry models are the ones that are answering specific questions. They can be done cheaply, they can grow fast, and they can grow, and they're easy to scale. And part of the scaling is, do I have the manpower to do that? Which leads us into the resources. Every ministry requires money, it requires resource, and probably most importantly, it requires workforce. Do not underestimate the workforce need to run some of this. When I consult with congregations, that's one of the first things of like, hey, if we had a $50,000 budget and you've got a 10-person tech team, we can do a lot, right? I mean, there's a lot of things out there, but the truth is, most of us don't have that kind of money budget, and probably more importantly, money is kind of the easy part in some senses. We don't have the people with the desire or the tech or the know-how to run some of this, right? I mean, some of our churches, especially bigger churches, you look in their AV room, and I mean, you're getting pretty close to what we ran at the TV station nowadays. The board we run, we bought from a TV station at Gold Hill Road. I mean, and we're not unique in that. So the bigger you get, the more you can do, and the more fun it becomes, in a certain sense. But you got to have the people to do it. And so you have to take a realistic evaluation of what is the resources needed, and do I have those resources to commit? So now we're really going to get into the practical side of individual ministry versus congregational ministry. There are things that you can do, and this is going to be my biggest pitch for you, because I recognize that most people here and the most that will watch this online, they aren't maybe you are, but my guess is that you're not over technology for your entire congregation. If you are, let's talk about that, because it'd be great. But most of you are probably, ministers, lay members that say, hey, we see the value in digital technology, but what can I do individually? And then we'll look at what we can do congregationally. So kind of and all of this advice that I'm going to give is current as of today. And that only means that it's going to work. It could potentially work, let me rephrase. Today, we've seen some success with it. 6 months from now, a year from now, technology rolls over itself about every 3 years. Microsoft did a big study a couple years ago, and they said that the most prevalent technology 3 years ago are mid-tier technology today. So technology, and the more advanced we get, and now that AI has come out and things like this will only increase. So things that work today may not necessarily work tomorrow, but they are at least baselines that can help us move in the right direction. So podcasting is the one that I always point to in terms of individuals. It's cheap. You can get up and going for under $100. It is probably one of the lesser tapped digital vehicles right now. Video, has been around much longer than podcasting, although audio was probably the original digital media. That was easier to put out long before video came around. But podcasting as a whole, as you probably know, upwards of a quarter, between 25 and 30% of Americans listen to a podcast daily. And this is increasing by about 5 to 7% every year. Podcasting is easily outpacing video in terms of preference and prominence, certainly with people under about the age of 50. Now, you get over than that, and there's still some great podcasts that are kind of more slanted there. But podcasting's great. Like I said, there's about 464 million podcast listeners globally as of 23. They're expecting that to get over to 500 million people by 2024. So it is rapidly rising. Spotify and Apple are still probably the two biggest streaming services. And all I tell you that is, if you do a podcast, make sure they're on that. And I'll show you how to very easily make sure of that. We're lucky the United States has the most podcast listeners in the world. It's predicted that over 100 million active podcast listeners will be in the U.S. by this year. And that is increasing rapidly. 1/3 of every American population listens to a podcast on a regular basis. And this has been, again, just because we've had success with it doesn't mean you might, but at Gold Hill Road, we put all of our sermons out in podcast form because we have people that drive 20, 30 minutes to work. They may want to listen to one again. It takes about 5 minutes to get that together, and we put that out regularly. We do a podcast called The Curious Christian, which is just answering questions and things like that. They're less than 10 minutes long. So podcasts are great, and a lot of people are listening to them, and they're easy to get set up and going. So this is not mine, but this is pretty close to what I have. I've got a few extra things, and so I didn't want to overwhelm, but I found this online. This is pretty close to what a very basic podcast setup would look like. You notice, if you're familiar at all with audio and audio engineering, then there's no board here. You don't need it. You can have it, but this is not XLR mics. These are USB mics, which are great. Basically, all you need is a computer, and you need a microphone that plugs into the USB slot on the side of your computer, and the rest of it's software. So you can go much more than this. All that big arm is called a boom. You don't need that either. I'll show you a mic that I like. You can regularly buy it on Amazon for about $50. It's a collaboration with a company called Logitech and a company called Blue. Blue makes a great mic called the Yeti that has been around since at least 2010. And they made a smaller one called the Snowball, and it's $50 almost every day on Amazon. It's a fantastic mic. But all podcasting is you're taking an audio interface, you're taking a mic, you're talking into it, and you've got something that's recording you. We'll look at that software here in a moment. It's free, the one I always recommend to people. And then you do a little bit of editing. You can get as fancy with that as you want, or it can be as simple as cutting out the dead space on the front end and the back end, intro and outro, and then you publish it. I mean, that's it. It is not more complicated than this. I don't anymore, but what I recommend to new folks is a program called Audacity. Audacity is free. You can use it on Mac. You can use it on Windows. I'm a Mac guy, but Windows, it's got available as well. It is completely free. It's not freemium, meaning it's not free in the initial stage and then they make you pay for it down the road. It is completely free by and large. It's not the most robust, but for your first 15, 20, maybe even 50 episodes, this is what you're going to cut your teeth on. Again, it's called Audacity, Audcity, I believe. And if you Google it, that's their logo right up in the very top. It's blue headphones with wavelengths in the middle. But Audacity's great, and that's what you're going to actually record into. So when you hook your microphone up, you're going to set that to record, that big red button there in the kind of top center. You're going to hit record, and you're going to record everything into that, and that's going to have everything. Then you're going to take that into a editing program, very, very simple. You're going to cut out what you don't want, and you're ultimately going to upload it to something like Podbean. Podbean is one of my favorites. It's about $3 to $5 a month, depending on what plan you use. Podbean does all the heavy lifting, and this is oversimplifying how to do a podcast, but it's not a lot more. But if you're more interested, I'll give you some resources on how to learn this. But Podbean is a site that you upload a podcast to. And if you look over there in the app section right here, that is what's going to distribute to Spotify and to Apple and to Google and to a bunch of other podcast hosting sites that you probably don't know about because they're not near as big. Spotify and Apple own about 60-70% of the market share, but some of the others are kind of picking up steam. You have a dashboard up there. You can see all your episodes. You can do branding. You can put in, thumbnails for each one if you want. You can do a lot of things if you want to, but it's as basic as you create a file in your editing software. You upload it here, and you check about 10 boxes, and it just sends it. And within about an hour, you look on Spotify, and your episode will be there. And again, it's a couple bucks a month. Very, very cheap. This is that Snowball mic. Again, it's a collaboration between Logitech, who has made great devices for 25 years or more, and a company called Blue, who makes a great bigger mic if you want to get into XLR mics and stuff. Kind of the next evolution of this would be an XLR setup, which is kind of the 3-prong audio cable, if you've ever seen that. That would hook up to the end of your mic and go into a board, which is a lot more customizable, but it's a lot more fiddly. You kind of have to know what you're doing in terms, it's not hard, but you got to know a little bit about it. I would suggest once you get a few episodes under your belt, if you really like it, get back with me and we'll get you set up, because you can get a very basic board. If you got a really simple little PV board, which is not great, but it would get you going, $70, $80 up to tens of thousands. I mean, that's what TV stations and stuff use. And then the board will take all your audio input and they'll send it out to your computer. So it basically is just a middle ground between your audio and your computer, and it can help enhance it, it can make it softer, it can make it louder, it can do effects. But for the beginning, you don't need that. This is a great start, plugs right into your computer, you're set to go. You can even find these, I don't know that the Snowball does, but I've got an iPad Pro that I teach from. I've recorded over 50 episodes with that. I've got a Rode mic that's a USB-C mic. So it plugs in out of the mic directly in here, and I use a program called GarageBand, and I record directly on that, throw it into an editing software. It can be as simple as that. So whatever computer you have at home, don't go buy a specific computer for this unless you just have the budget for it, but you don't need it. You can do it on an iPad if you really want to. Think Media is one of my favorites. It's not Church of Christ based, so there's my disclaimer there. But they do really great education. In terms of podcasting, they do video stuff. Like I said, this is a video podcast, which is what it just sounds like. It's still audio primarily, but you got a camera going just to kind of record that candid conversation. That's one of my favorite, that Top Video Podcast Basics. That is about 10 minutes long, not a long video, but they will walk you through step by step, and they give you gear recommendations if you want. Of course, they make money on that, so, do your own research. But Think Media is great. And I mean, they have multiple millions of subscribers. They are a huge YouTube channel, and they really are good educators. I mean, in terms of digital space, there's others that I like for audio specifically or video specifically or for, whatever it might be. But if I just had to recommend one, Think Media is probably it. And you can get a lot of education there for free. Okay, so transitioning from podcast into probably my next favorite thing that I encourage churches to get on board with, which is short-form content. So this is anything under a minute long. So short-form content, if you don't know what that is, go talk to a teenager because that's all they consume right now. You can find TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram have what are called Reels. That's basically the same thing. Facebook owns Instagram. This is not it. But this is the lion's share of it. And these are just short, quick little videos. And this is great. This is a blessing that this is becoming so popular. This takes a lot of the pressure away from churches to do these really big, elaborate videos. Those are fun to make, and they still have a place. But most young people, in fact, we found, I'll give you kind of my pitch for these. They did some research and found that about 30% of the top TikTok creators. Not necessarily recommending that TikTok be your avenue, but TikTok is kind of the golden child at the moment in terms of short-form content. Over 30 of the top 100, millions of subscribers between them, use only a phone and a portable mic to make all their videos. That's it. No cameras, not even using something like the Snowball. They are literally plugging in if they're using an iPhone, they've got a Lightning connection. If it's Android, they've got probably USB-C. They've got a little mic that probably something like this, like a little portable Rode mic or even something wired, just to kind of get audio, and that's it. And they're recording on the video section or memos or something on their phone. That is their entire thing. And again, these are people that have millions and millions of subscribers, and this is sufficient. And so churches can do the same. Short-form video is great because it's easily shareable. Most of the viral content that you've seen within the last 5 years has probably been, at least the majority of it has been short-form content. There are some long-form videos, but even before short-form content had its name, that's what it was doing, right? If you look at some of the early YouTube videos that got popular, none of them were over 2 or 3 minutes long, right? If you look at, Charlie Bit My Finger and like some of the really early internet viral sensations, they're like 2 or 3 minutes long, which is technically longer than short form, but they're shareable, right? You're not going to share a video more than likely, if it's an hour long. But if it's 30 seconds, if it's a minute, if it's a minute and a half, you can share that with somebody. You laugh about it and you move on. Short form is really great for that. Cisco, who, if you're in the data world, Cisco's a giant in this, perhaps the giant. They found that by 2022, again, this was as most recent as I could find, but 2022, they said mobile video particularly, will comprise over 78%, over 3/4 of all mobile data traffic. So that means that almost 80% of everything that comes into a smartphone is going to be video of some sort, right? So again, a massive opportunity for us to tap into even a fraction of that. We can spread the gospel in a pretty magnificent way. Short-form video is great for SEO. I'm not an SEO expert, but that is basically how effective your channel, your TikTok account, your website, how is it ranking within Google? So Google, is kind of the giant in this space. And what they do is it's called indexing. And so they'll go in and they'll crawl down through a web page, TikTok, and it'll find keywords. So if you made a video that said, what's the context of Romans 6? And then put in that explanation. When somebody then goes to Google and says, hey, what's the context of Romans 6? Who wrote Romans 6? What does this mean? Google knows that your video is about that. And there's, people that literally have entire careers doing this very thing for Fortune 500 companies. But short form video is great because Google knows that short form is kind of the preference right now. So when you put out a short form video, they will prioritize your short form video over a comparable long form video. So if we look, Google Data Analytics, they put out a lot of information for free if you know where to find it and know how to understand it. But they said that right now, short-form content ranks and indexes 23% better than similar long-form content. So what that means is if you made a 10-minute video about Romans 6 and you made a minute-long video about Romans 6, Google is saying that your minute-long video will index, meaning about 23% of people will find it easier than your longer video. And you would say, Keaton, why is that? There's less content there. I can't be as thorough. And I get that. But the majority of people, that's what they're utilizing. And so Google is going to provide them with results that they know people want to see, right? They are in the business of giving you what they think you want. That's what cookies are. That's why when you look at an ad and then across all your devices, you're seeing more of those ads, right? That's what Google is in the business of. So the quicker we can understand that in the church world, the better off we'll be. Short-form videos are also more cost-effective to produce. Again, we can look at this and again, Wired, if you've ever read Wired magazine, they also have a research branch. Most people don't know that, but they do some actual research in terms of media and things like this. And they said 31% of the top 100 TikTok creators use nothing more than a mobile phone and a portable mic to do their content, right? And again, we're talking cumulatively in the tens of millions of subscribers between the top 100. Could be even more than that, into the hundreds of millions. But it does not have to be expensive to create. Number three, we're still in kind of the individual, and we're going to quickly run through this and get into the congregation. Start an active social media account. Now, there's some disclaimers here. Facebook accounts are not as valuable as they used to be, right? If you were to start this 10 years ago, you would have something special because churches, organizations were not viewing Facebook as a viable strategy, so they weren't making many. You might have been one of 1,000, whereas now you're going to be ones of tens of thousands in Facebook in particular. They're not as valuable as they used to be, but in my opinion, I still suggest of churches of any size need to have one because Tom Rainer, who does some great research on different things, we'll look at a quote from him in a minute. I would suggest to congregations don't prioritize any social media except for video content because of how valuable it is until you have an active Facebook page of at least 500 followers. I think your effort is folly. I see churches and consult with churches a lot that, they're trying to, they're doing Instagram, they're doing Twitter, they're doing Facebook, they're doing LinkedIn, they're doing all these things, and they've got like 20 followers amongst each one of them. They're really not moving the needle. What you want to look at, and I just use ours not to pat us on the back, but just quickly to show you where this is. This is our Facebook page at Gold Hill Road. If you look on your page, you will see that number of how many followers you have. What that means is that anytime you post new content, they get one of those little bell notifications that says, hey, Gold Hill Road or Concord Road or Brentwood or whoever put out new content. Now, a lot of that is going to be your members, right? If you got a big congregation, but I can promise you Gold Hill Road doesn't have, 1.2 thousand folks at our congregation, but these are people that have, for whatever reason, liked and followed this. So again, Keaton's recommendation, you don't have to follow this, but I would not prioritize any social media until you get that Facebook page up to at least 500 followers. Because then it's active, people know what to expect, it can become really valuable. Tom Rainer, who again, he writes, not a member of the Church of Christ, but writes some really great content and books and things like this, said, an actively managed Facebook page is your most valuable digital asset besides your website. So we're going to look at websites here in a minute when we get to the kind of congregational side of this. Okay, so that'll be our transition quickly because we're running out of time. Congregational ministry. To me, this is where it starts and really to a degree where it ends. In terms of congregation, we could talk about streaming and stuff like that, but that's really broader than our context here. I'm assuming that most of your congregations are streaming video for sermons and websites or for different things. If you're not, come find me and we can get you set up with that. When the pandemic started and I had the ability to consult with a few churches, we got streaming up and going pretty well for about $500-600. Things have increased a little bit, so maybe about 1,000 now, but you do not have to have tens of thousands of dollars to get a streaming setup going by any means. And you probably have most of the gear already. One thing I prioritize to churches when somebody calls me in and says, hey, what can we do better in terms of digital media? I say, let me see your website. I can learn 80-90% of what I need to know about where a church stands in terms of their media based on their website. You may think that's silly, but it's true. Websites are your front doormat. So much research has been done well outside the scope of just church, of businesses, organizations. Fortune 500 companies are wanting to understand how important is the website that we have. Do people even care? Because Fortune 500s are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some cases monthly, to maintain really big websites. Is it worth it, right? In companies where every cent counts. So we're able to kind of leech off that research and figure this out for the church world as well. Pew continued to look at this, and this may be, if you remember nothing else, I encourage you to think about this. 91%, so again, we're over 9 out of 10 people, of active church seekers, and they define that as people that are looking for a new church home and people that are unchurched, so they are non-Christians looking for Christianity. 91% of active church seekers will visit your website 5 times before they ever enter your building. So they are looking at your website multiple times through, probably watching video content if it's there. They are wanting to get a great sense of what you're all about before they are ever going to give you the time of day, and certainly before they're ever going to step foot in your building. So if we truly believe that we have the greatest news to offer and we are trying to get people into the building, we have to recognize that in today's world, in the digital age that we live in, website is the king of this hill. It is just, there's no second place really. Websites are still the preeminent thing that a church can have. This is Keaton's opinion. You don't have to agree with me, but I've consulted with a lot of churches and built websites for churches. Effective websites are not created for existing members. That has always been the kind of the fallacy that people believe is we're going to create this and our members are going to do A, B, and C. The truth is that if you have members that are active, they are at your building multiple times a week, ideally. They're getting the bulletin, they're hearing announcements, they're having lunch with other church members, right? Their kids are in youth group. They are getting all the information that you might want to put on a church's website. The website is for visitors. If you want to utilize it the way that we see it utilized most effectively, you are creating it exclusively with the visitor in mind. And I'll give you kind of the tips that I have for that. So for me, here's what I share with churches. This is the must-haves for a good church website. Must-haves, non-negotiable. If I create your website, these are going to be on there. These are deal breakers for me. One is they have to be easy to navigate. If they're not easy to navigate, I can get over if they're not easy to look at, but they got to be easy to navigate. We want them to look good, but that's the first and foremost. What to expect. This is beyond, we just don't have the time. I wish we could do session 2 of this, and we'd go into the research of why what to expect is so significant. But when you've got people, imagine, that have never stepped foot in your church building, maybe they've never stepped foot in a church building, period. Some of the research is pointing us to the idea that their biggest fear is, I don't know what to expect. I don't know what it's going to be like. There's people that are getting up and they just start singing, and I have no idea why. They start talking about the Lord's Supper and passing around plates, and they're taking these. Again, that seems so elementary to you and me, but imagine that you have never grown up in this, you've never been to a church. It could be intimidating. So what to expect is a massive thing. Sermon and class examples. If you all go on vacation and you find churches to worship with, my guess is that you go on their website, on their Facebook page, watch some of their sermons. Are we gonna gel with this congregation? Are they scriptural, things like that? And then maybe most importantly is unique connection opportunities. So if you've got children's ministry, you need to let people know that. If you've got seniors ministry, you need to let them know that. If you've got Hispanic ministry, if you've got empty nesters, if you've got whatever, people today are wanting community. That's not just a millennial thing. That's not just a Gen X thing. Our society is trending more, which is probably a good thing, towards we want to feel valued. We want to be in an organization that matters, that influences the community, and we want to do it with people that are in our same season of life. So really quickly, this is the Madison Church of Christ in Madison, Alabama. One of the elders there is on the board with me at Palmetto Bible Camp and gave me permission to use this. They don't have a perfect website, but they got a pretty good one, and they also spent a lot of money to make it. So really great websites can be done cheaply, but to get fantastic, which I would say Madison is one of, it can take some money because they had people come in and actually code it. This is not a Wix site. Not to besmirch Wix, but this is not that. So we look at what they do really well. Again, now they've kind of blended a little bit of my advice with some of their own. They do have some stuff here. That Serve tab is all for members, as well as that Login tab. But you notice the first two are who are we, and if you're new here, what might you need to know? If you were to click on that I'm New tab, you would find this: what to expect at our worship gatherings. Very plain, very simple. This is what it goes. This is the times. There's a cappella singing. We do a weekly observance of the Lord's Supper. We read Scripture. We have fellowship. We have prayer. Again, you don't have to give some great theological explanation as to why. There will be times for that later, but you need to let them know what's coming. And then they also have what's in our Bible study, right? And if they were to ask me, which they didn't, but if they would, I would put in there also, we have kids classes, right? So your kids ages nursery up through high school, we have classes for them because I know they do. What to expect is significant. This is a smaller example for a church that I helped with. They were a smaller congregation, but again, the setting, the music, prayers, sermons, what are these things like? Again, people need to know, is it going to be an hour long? Is it going to be 2 hours long? How long can I expect to be there? That kind of thing. Communion, financial offering, invitation, things like that. If you want to make a website, and again, I encourage people to go to YouTube. University of YouTube is a real thing. If you want to do that, Squarespace has got a lot of videos. That is who I always recommend. If you or somebody at your church wants to make a new website, I would always, 100% of the time, point you to Squarespace. If you don't have the budget to send somebody to come make it for you, Squarespace is the next best thing. It is drag and drop. It is not the cheapest. And we don't have time to go into what widgets are and things like that, but if you were to build a site like on Wix or some of the comparable things, widgets are basically the little built-in back things that make the website function the way you want it to. So you want your website to have a pop-up when you get at your homepage. If somebody's at your homepage for more than 10 seconds, a pop-up comes up for them to enter their email and get on your mailing list. There's a widget to make that possible. But that widget has to be updated, it has to be monitored. Sometimes they just die. And your website completely crashes. Squarespace is completely native. I certainly know anything by pointing you to them. They're not the cheapest, but everything is natively built in. There is no widgets to keep updated with. They keep everything in-house. They are super secure. Everything is drag and drop, and you can make some really gorgeous websites with Squarespace for about $15 a month. So, and that other than owning your own domain, then that's all you have to really function with. And lastly, and this is our last point, is upload sermon and class media. And of course, if you want some advice on if your church isn't streaming, that I sort of treated this class as an assumption that we were all streaming, and that's not to belittle a congregation that isn't, but I do want to encourage you to think about that. Because that is the way we're heading forward. But upload your class and sermon media. It doesn't have to be fancy. Create a YouTube account for your church. All your sermons, and even if you don't want to pull the sermon out, just upload your Sunday morning worship, Wednesday night worship, Sunday night worship, and give it really good titles, right? It needs to have titles that people know what it's about. Do not just put, July 29th, 2023 worship. That means absolutely nothing to anybody. That is not going to index at all, because that means nothing, other than if somebody was looking at, what is that particular church doing on July 29th? What you need to do is, okay, here's the sermon title, here's the class title, so they know, hey, that sermon was on, Galatians 5, and that class was on, evangelism. Okay, that matters, right? Be very specific, and that includes your description as well. And again, we could talk about that more later. That's digital discipleship in a 101, very broad. I know it's drinking through a fire hose. But this is the future, in my view. Again, I think this is one of our most significant mission fields that we have that we don't talk enough about. There are way more that do this professionally that are better than me, but it is something I love and have had some experience with in the past. So if I can help you, please come find me. Let me know. I'd be glad to offer any insight I can. But